I've been meaning to discuss this for a while. When I made the Why I Don't Approach Women video, there was a largely positive response. The negative reception, however, was filled with claims that I was too ugly to get a woman, too nerdy, assumptions that I did not own anything, just a wide spectrum of critiques and insults that were about as useful as using a knife to combat a tank. And they weren't useless because I disagreed with them. They were useless because they failed to understand the concept of the phrase, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. When I know that men in poor neighborhoods have been able to have relationships, and I have a person commenting that I need to get more money, that comment is automatically invalidated by reality. When I know that men or women who I don't find attractive have been able to have relationships, and I have people commenting about how hideous I am, that comment is automatically invalidated by reality. The fact that people of varying wealth, appearance, age, and personalities have been able to get into relationships should certify that the only thing stopping a person from getting in one is the lack of a willing partner. That's it. But when I thought about these comments, the ones that indicated that I needed to work out, have some excess of wealth, a degree, etc., suddenly it dawned on me that I was being treated more like a character in some work of fiction than an actual person. See, actual people are allowed to have flaws, such as not being physically appealing to every person of the opposite sex they meet. But when you're a man, you have to be the real world equivalent of Superman. Any trait you have that one computer clown might not find attractive is now suddenly the fatal flaw that stops you from getting a partner. Does anyone honestly believe that if I had a different hairstyle, which I have had, or a degree, there would be this massive difference in the result I got from approaching? Does anyone believe in the existence of the magic cut, a hairstyle that guarantees you a woman? And does anyone believe no man with a college degree has ever had trouble getting a woman? Apparently this person does. We'll come back to him later. Just know that I'll be referring to him as Ultra Instinct Illiterate, UII. Now, VVS is a former commentator on my channel. I recommend his channel, and I'm only mentioning him as doing something that I don't personally do. You can see in this screenshot the names of a certain romance group, and I've been very adamant about not identifying as a member of that group, and I'll explain why. There are a lot of people who, if you were to ask them what that group is, they would say, it's men who are angry because they can't get sex. I've spoken at length about how I would want to date first with long-term aspirations, including getting married and having a family, and how the last one was really the only thing that kept motivating me to keep trying over and over. But that's a specific thing I want that is not in line with the view that members of that group just want sex. My worry is that if I were to declare I'm part of that group, I would be considered a member of that group of guys that are mad they can't get sex, as opposed to that person who is mad that he couldn't get a date because he saw it as a stepping stone to eventually getting married and having children. So me being in that group would be a way for people to treat my disdain for not getting in a relationship as if it were about sex when it isn't. I live in California, meaning I can drive to Las Vegas, Nevada to legally get screwed for a price. I really wish more people would stop pretending that getting sex is difficult. It's getting a woman that is interested in the date that's the equivalent of looking for a needle in a haystack. People have this deficiency where someone can say something and they purposely hear something else. When I spoke to Triple L, I said to her that if someone has to be a certain age to get a relationship, which was her claim, how were classmates of the same age as me able to get something I could not? She eventually, in her response, got around to saying that I did not come off to her as someone who just wants a date, despite this literally being what I said I wanted. So she headcanoned her way out of actually believing what I had stated. But Triple L was one of the first internet psychologists I spoke to repeatedly. In this current screenshot, there was a user who accused me of being a coper. And you can see the user who responded by accusing me of being a member of that romance regime I will not name. The actual definition of that group is that they are members of an online subculture who define themselves as unable to find a romantic or sexual partner despite desiring one. If all I do is upload videos and not interact with people about this topic, I'm automatically a member of a subculture. Do you think if a woman said she was tired of trying to get a date, people would say that makes her part of a team of people she doesn't even talk to? So let the lesson be learned. If you're a man having issues with women, you might as well not even waste your breath saying anything because people will hear something else regardless. Another point I was going to mention is that when you have trouble with broads, people assess it as having to impact every single part of your life. I had a bimbo on my video who compared not approaching women to not looking for a job, even though one is non-essential while the other is. In this screenshot, you can see these two gossiping men claim that I am using politics to cope with not being in a relationship. I have been into politics since 2013. Does anyone honestly believe I have spent hours a day for years investing in this topic as a way of coping with not being in a relationship? Does anyone believe I majored in political science as part of a scheme to cope with not having a woman? But this is what I was talking about. You as a man are not allowed to actually like doing something because you find it interesting. It all has to be interwoven with broads because that's what they think about all day, every day. A Mary Sue is a character in fiction that is depicted as unrealistically lacking in flaws or weaknesses. So when I have people who claim I'm unconfident or don't have enough money, understand they're basically trying to get me to be a real life Mary Sue, which should be impossible since you'll always have women that don't find you attractive or aren't interested, which is fine because those are differences that make us human. Of course, when you're being treated in an inhumane manner online, then your differences are all automatically bad and you must strive to be considered attractive to every single woman alive. A component of that group I mentioned earlier is self-loathing, which is defined as a person being extremely disgusted with oneself. Remember that ultra instinct illiterate comment from earlier? In that comment, I was accused of having no confidence. Notice that I've never done a video where I've talked about being disgusted with myself or hating who I am. That's because if there was one living person I've been consistently confident in, it's been me. I'm proud of my intellect, my personality, my art, my videos, my books, my documentaries, and my show. I wouldn't be able to criticize the choices made by women that I've tried to go on a date with if I didn't believe that I was in the right. I believe I'd make a great partner, and someone on a computer who's never met me isn't going to change that opinion. A lot of people who discuss relationships don't show their face, but I do, because I'm not ashamed of the way I look. My ideology has been to do things I want to do and accept the things I cannot change, while being vulnerable and self-aware enough to admit that the way things turned out still bother me from time to time. Not being in a relationship for years because women don't think you're good enough for them sucks. And I know getting in a relationship would be 10 times easier if I had a vagina. That being said, my life mission is not to have sex 100 times. The only two things a woman could have given me that I really would have wanted out of life were to get married and have children. And while that might have produced 2 to 5 decent people, I've accepted that it won't happen, but that doesn't mean I can't do other things that fulfill me. I'm a survivor. It's why I'm still doing videos, still smiling, being the man most of these broads didn't even bother getting to know, which should be proof a lot of them are sharp as Play-Doh. When a story is being written, people will speculate on future parts of it and treat their speculation as a certainty. In keeping with my dehumanizing on the scale of me not even being considered a real person, I've had people do this with my life. Triple L speculated that women would eventually mature and I would have a different caliber of women approach me. This is already stupid because we know that age has nothing to do with someone of the opposite sex finding you attractive, but even if it was true, so what? It's not my burden to bear that someone else takes years to conceive the idea that I'm good enough for their conceited self. I have another commentator who wrote that I would either commit mass violence, commit suicide, or become a player. Think of how insane that first one is. A man who disavows violence of any kind is going to magically become this homicidal maniac because dozens of broads said no. The second one could come to pass, but if I did kill myself, it wouldn't be because I thought I failed or was disappointed in myself. It would be because my contemporaries suck so hard. My only conceivable way of escape was to end my life. So if I'm in my mid-40s, still unmarried and childless, and the kids of my contemporaries start having kids, that's my cue to withdraw. But again, I don't know how everything in my life is going to go. So how can people who've never met me mark out a pathway in my life? In conclusion, I don't believe any group should have a monopoly on discussing being disenchanted with women. People also need to stop pretending that just because you have a trait they don't like, no one else will, because that's a delusion of grandeur. And we've seen too many variances in the way successful couples look to know there isn't an appearance that guarantees anything. Not every man looks or acts like me or has the same hobbies. And in a normal society with normal people online, that would be okay. But because people so desperately want men to be homogenized and act less like individuals and more like the Borg from Star Trek, it isn't. It would be nice to say I'm not part of anyone's team and have that be the end of it, which is something that if I were a woman would be the case. I don't speak in riddles. My audio isn't gargled. I take my time articulating what specific wants I sought from a relationship, and that I'm not part of anyone's crew, that I'm a person with his own specific wants and requests. But remember the penis penalty. When a man tries, people ignore him, worsen his situation, and make up lies until that man dies.